Welcome back, everyone, to the Profane Humanities podcast. Still getting used to that rename myself. Do I have an episode for you today? Joining me is Josh Guerrero, a former US Marine, a returned Peace Corps volunteer. He's also an archaeologist and the author and host of the All-Around Adventure travel blog and podcast. He's also the host of the 15 Questions with an Archaeologist podcast, which is run for the United States Park Service. Today we get to talk about some of the things that Josh has done, but we really barely scratched the surface. So what I do want to put out there before I go live with this is that this is hopefully just part one of a 2, possibly even 3-part interview that we'll conduct over the coming months or year, depending on time allowing. And we'll get more into the archaeological work and various other aspects of his adventures in the next episode. For now, we're focusing on Josh's background in the military and the Peace Corps and some of his various other travel adventures. So buckle in, because this will be a bit of a ride. And please welcome to the show, Josh Guerrero. Josh, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Paul. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, as have I. Now, I know that you are a man of many talents, and I want to get into even some of those things if I can, if we get time today. And you got up very early for this interview, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Whose brilliant idea was this to do it this early?
Josh very kindly volunteered to get up at 5 a.m., which I think is a testament to the discipline of the Marine Corps and the Peace Corps, I'm guessing. But I want to get into all of that. But first, I kind of want to roll it back a bit, because I've been diving into your world and hearing about your various experiences. I kind of wanted to get into your background a little bit first, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
So I understand that you grew up in or near Detroit. Is that right?
About 2 hours north. I'm from a really small town, kind of in the thumb of the lower peninsula of Michigan. Mm-hmm. If you were to see it on a map, you'll kind of see how the lower peninsula of my home state of Michigan kind of looks like a mitten. You know, that's what we call it.
Right.
And I'm kind of tucked in that thumb area. So, yeah, about 2 hours north of Detroit. Yeah, around there.
What was it like, that town?
Well, really small. Population about 1,100 people. You know, everybody knows everybody in that town. You kind of got to be careful who you ask out on a date, because y'all actually might be related to some degree, too. That's a joke I always tell about my small town. And big farming community. Much of my extended family, not my immediate family, they're all farmers. And it was a nice place to grow up, actually. And it's just, living on a dirt road, it was a nice, quiet place. But at the same time, though, as I got older, I realized that there was much more to the world than just my small town and, my immediate circle of friends and family. And eventually it did lead to me leaving there to go, I guess, start this good, grandiose journey of life that I'm now currently on.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you get into the city much? We've all heard stories about Detroit. It's, it's where RoboCop is set. I mean, it's we hear these tales about Detroit. Is it as rough as all that, or?
Well, at least not from what I saw growing up. Of course, I hear the usual stories, high crime areas in Detroit. And sometimes Detroit is one of those cities that, yes, if you need a urban setting that's known for high crime to, create a good crime drama or action film, Detroit is one of those cities that usually kind of comes to the fold for such a setting. And, movies like RoboCop, like you've alluded to. So, but I think a lot of it's like any other city, though. There you have your good areas, and of course you're inevitably going to have your bad areas just as well too. So, but I think actually, I overall though, just larger cities like that was not something I frequented very much as I was growing up. I think just leading up to 18, when I ultimately graduated high school and then I moved on to the military, big cities weren't something that I frequented very much. I'm certainly seeing them more and more as I've been traveling and exploring the world. But just growing up, though, it wasn't really much of a thing. I think I kind of just sort of stuck to my local small town, if you will.
And so, I mean, if your family were farmers, and I'm guessing there wasn't a military precedent set there already, it wasn't a military family, so to speak?
No, not at all, and very little military in my extended family as well. It was so I was kind of a little bit of an outlier in that degree, and I think what kind of set me down that path. I hope I'm not getting too ahead of your question.
No, go for it.
But it was I was a sophomore in high school, and this was in 2001, and as you know, everyone knows, in 2001, my country was attacked on September 11th. And I remember I was walking into history class that day, and every single classroom in my high school has a wall-mounted TV. And I walked in getting ready for class, and the TV was on, which was a bit unusual because seldomly do we even actually use the TV in this class. And so to have it on as you walk in, that's a little bit strange. And then I look up and I see that the footage of the first tower being on fire. Mm-hmm. And that kind of course, the word got around to the rest of the school, and we were all kind of confused as to what's going on. And then and then once the second tower was hit, it became very apparent to us that, yeah, we're under attack. And it was a little bit strange to me because, at this point in my life, I've never actually seen something like a terrorist attack or something that would be considered, let's say, a declaration of war. It was very much a new thing for me. And needless to say, since this happened early in the morning, the teachers and the teaching staff, they weren't very productive for the rest of the day. They pretty much abandoned just all lessons because I guess they weren't entirely sure if they should be sending us home or what they should do. But we did kind of go through the rest of the day. And then, then we all went home to ponder on it. And the very next day, September 12th, military recruiting offices around the country had lines out the door, just full of patriots who basically, obviously, and for good reason, didn't like the fact that we just got attacked just now. And around that time, the thoughts of what I was going to do after high school, was starting to come to mind. I was a sophomore, and I was thinking, okay, should I go to college, or what should I do? But once the attacks happened, it became very apparent to me what I was going to do, and that was I was going to join the military, and I was going to step up, and I was going to serve my country. And not only did I make that decision, but I also made the decision to join the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps, they had the reputation of being, the toughest military branch that we had, the tip of the spear, if you will. And so in my sophomore year, I enlisted in what's called the delayed entry program, which is just kind of a year-long preparatory program to kind of get me ready for the challenges of boot camp. I would work with Marine Corps recruiters and other recruits beforehand just to kind of, get ready to be successful in boot camp. And then fast forwarding to my senior year, I'm talking literally 3 weeks after I walked across the stage at graduation, I was on a plane to San Diego, California to start boot camp. And that's how I spent my summer that year. So while the rest of my peers were, just kind of enjoying the summer, getting ready to start up college in the fall, I was, getting my ass kicked. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
No, it's fine. You know how I roll. So
yeah. So that summer I spent getting my ass kicked in boot camp. And then of course that just really set me on a pretty interesting journey from there.
What did the conversation, there's this watershed moment in American history, and this is obviously a watershed moment for yourself and, your peers as well. You go home, you mull over this decision, you decide to, as you say, become part of the point of the spear, so to speak, in the response to this attack. What does the conversation with your family look like when you inform them of that decision?
Right. Well, a good sense of pride for sure. And, my father especially knew that I had, that I was a very patriotic person growing up. I remember just as I was younger, he bought me an American flag. I would put it on my wall in my bedroom. But I think the toughest person that I had to convince to make this decision was my mother. And of course, she was really proud that I would step up and make a decision like this to be of service to my country. And again, kind of be one of the first in my family to do it. Because as I've alluded to earlier, much of my family and my extended family, there's not much military background to be seen there. So for me to step up and do it as well was something that she was very proud of. But of course, I don't think mothers will never stop worrying about their kids, no matter how old you get, right?
Yeah.
So especially with me still being pretty young, again, I was 16 in my sophomore year, and I was 17 when I enlisted in the delayed entry program. So yeah, she's only had me around for so long, right?
Yeah.
So she was very, very concerned about that, and especially with at this time there was still a fair amount of confusion going on. It's like, how are we going to respond to this? What's this going to lead to? What's this going to look like? A year from now, 2 years from now, and then lo and behold, this conflict lasted for a very, very long time. It was a very long conflict. So she was obviously pretty worried, and I certainly will say that the day that my recruiter came to pick me up so I can get shipped off to boot camp was a very, very, very emotional day for my family and I. And it was like we took a walk together that morning, and it was one of those things where we weren't sure, like, what the future had in store for me. It was kind of like the last little semblance of normalcy we would have for a while. And, just, I just remembered my mom would, pray for me just as I was getting ready to leave the house to go into the recruiter's car. But so it was a good mix of things, I guess, to kind of get back to your question. It was a mix of emotion, a good mix of pride, a mix of fear, but it was, it was definitely made family dynamics a little bit interesting for a while, to put it simply.
Yeah, no, I can well imagine. And then you're shipped off, and what was it like getting into that program? I mean, that must have been very, very tough, I can imagine.
Yeah, that would be putting it mildly.
Yeah,
for sure. And, you probably might have seen videos online of, Marine Corps drill instructors interacting with recruits, very in your face, screaming very, very intensely. And that was a little bit of a shock and awe moment. And this is kind of a funny story, but when we arrive at the airport in San Diego, you see kind of all the recruits that were there getting ready for boot camp. They're all kind of clustered in a similar area. And then a couple of drill instructors come to pick us up. And those that picked us up in the airport, they were a little bit more calm. I guess I'll say calm. They weren't yelling and screaming at you at this point, because obviously they're in the airport. That'll draw a lot of attention, I'm sure. And so they collect us. We do a little bit of paperwork, and and then they load us up into the bus. And when we get on the bus, we were told to put our heads down in between our knees and just look at the floor. And we weren't allowed to see where we were going.
Right.
And so that was a little bit weird. But as we were going to the depot, the recruit training depot, the bus driver, he said something to us. He says, "Hey, I know you all got a tough task ahead of you. Let me put on some music for you." And he puts on that song "Roses" by Outkast. So I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here. And so all of us recruits were kind of sitting there, and at least those that were sitting next to me and then across the aisle from me, we started singing along with our heads down. As so we're like, "I know you like to think your don't stink." And then all of a sudden the bus stops, the music stops, we hear the doors open, some very, very loud footsteps come up those stairs, and then all of a sudden we hear someone yell, "Get off my bus right now." And then we all just get up really fast, and then we just run off the bus. And then next thing we know, there's just several drill instructors there, and they line us up on the iconic yellow footprints, the same footprints that, thousands upon thousands of Marines have stood on before us, many whom have, of course, ultimately made the ultimate sacrifice and given their lives. And so that was the immediate shock and awe. And then once I actually met my drill instructors and my senior drill instructors that were going to be with us for the remaining, for the rest of the 3 months, it was pretty much the same thing too. A lot of the shock and awe, but it was, so it was really tough kind of dealing with that aspect, getting yelled at every day. And I probably got called a bitch so many times that I thought that's what my first name actually was. And, but at the same time, though, there was a lot of cool things that we learned. Of course, we learned, how to shoot the M16. We learned, first aid and combat trauma treatments. We learned a little bit about Marine Corps history and just a lot of other things that came with it along the way. And then, of course, as you've alluded to earlier, there's the discipline aspect that we take and a lot of character developments too. And then we also have the Marine Corps core values of honor, courage, and commitment that we would revisit from time to time to try to learn about that and how we can apply that not only into, just our role as Marines, but also just in our lives in general. And so despite the challenges, it was definitely a very, very worthwhile and amazing experience. And of course, you have your highs and lows. You have like some days where you're just really tired, you're exhausted, and you're so sluggish that you really want to do anything. But then you have other days where you're just, you have so much pep in your step that you're ready to conquer anything. So it kind of came in waves. So I endured that for 3 whole months. But just like the transformation that I saw, though, at the end of the 3 months, I was an entirely different person. I was much stronger, much capable, much more mentally sharp. And when my family came and saw me during the graduation ceremony, and I was talking with them and interacting with them, they could see it too. That this is definitely not the same Josh that they parted ways with 3 months earlier. So it was pretty amazing.
Trial by fire. What do you think was the greatest challenge, like not just from the training, but during your years of service?
Well, I think the greatest challenge for me was, I think kind of, that's an interesting question. And there's a lot of ways I can answer that, but I guess I'll just say what comes to mind right away. And that was just kind of having this enormous responsibility and weight on my shoulders, especially at still being such a young age. And because it's a bit of a weird transition being 18 years old and kind of undergoing that. And I hope this doesn't sound too weird to say, but I literally learned how to kill people before I learned how to like file my taxes or finance a car or anything like that. So kind of the thoughts of having such a responsibility like that and just trying to find my own way in life and just working a job like that, though, too. It was, pretty stressful. And, there was a lot of really, really tough times that I faced throughout my service. I mean, I didn't deploy. I was part of a non-deployable squadron. I was in the air wing. We were testing aircraft. But, there was a couple of times where, I would actually, go for a walk at night and, I would be so in like a really, really tough spot mentally where I would just, I would literally just drop and pray and just, ask, the man upstairs for some guidance. And so I think maybe that was just a lot of it was just having this enormous amount of responsibility at such a young age. And also the Marine Corps was my first job. So I was still trying to, figure out just what it means to actually be a decent employee, but, in a job as well. And now, mind you, of course, much of, what I'm describing here was, very, very early on in my service. But after a year and a half, 2 years, in which I kind of got a little bit more of a better foothold and got myself adjusted to the lifestyle that came with being a Marine, I kind of shaped up a little bit, so to speak. But for a good while, it didn't start out that way. But then, and also I started going to college. I started going for my associate's degree. So once I got that structure And, that thing to focus on too, things kind of shaped up a little bit for me. But for a good while, as I kind of got a foothold, I felt a little bit of drift, and it was a bit stressful. And, just of course trying to cultivate good, solid relationships with other Marines in my unit too took a little bit as well. So I'd say, probably just that initial adjustment period just to this new lifestyle, because Marines and as well as other service members, they're held to a much higher standard than probably what you would see in a lot of civilian organizations. So again, just having that expectation put on my shoulders too, it took a little bit, but eventually I got it.
And that led you into the life adventure you lead today. Before we leave the subject, though, like I understand there's a lot of there's a very high dropout rate from things like, the Navy SEALs have like Hell Week. Did you have an equivalent to that? And how did you get through it in the end? What was your inner mantra like? What was your self-talk like when you were pushing your way through these circumstances?
Right. Well, we didn't really have like a Hell Week like the Navy SEALs, or an assessment selection like the Army's Special Forces Green Berets do. We did have a certain 3-day long field exercise in boot camp called the Crucible, which took some elements from some of those other special operations selection processes. So basically what it was, and I'm probably going to get some of these numbers slightly off, but it was a 52-hour long field exercise.
No sleep, no rest.
Hardly any sleep. Like each night was maybe about 4 hours of sleep, if you actually were able to fall asleep. That is, we were only allowed 3 meals for that entire time. We had to hike so many miles with a full rucksack and our rifles. And we had to do obstacle course races. We had to do team building exercises, all of which were very, very physically demanding. We had a couple of live fire drills that we had to do. But I remember there was this one particular exercise where I really had to have some serious self-talk in my head to kind of push through. And basically what we had to do a simulated medevac, where if we had like a wounded Marine and that we had to get him to a helicopter landing, so an LZ, so that way we can get him extracted. But this LZ was on top of this hill. And so we actually had one of our recruits who was playing the wounded Marine. And then myself and 3 other Marines had to carry him on a stretcher. So I'm carrying the front end of the stretcher with my left hand. And at this was pretty late into the Crucible already. We're kind of starting to near the end, and I was exhausted. I was so tired. I felt physically drained and weak. And I just remembered that I had a really, really hard time holding on to this stretcher. And my arm, I could feel all the tiny micro tears in my arm, and I felt like my grip was going to give way. And I kind of told myself, and I kind of put myself in that combat mindset where I said to myself, Josh, if you let go, he dies. So you better hold on. And so I kept saying that to myself over and over again through the pain, through my fingers and my grip, just not feeling like it can hold on any longer. I just kept telling myself, hold on or else he dies. And then I kept telling that to myself. And then eventually we made it to the top of that hill, and we made it to the helicopter, and we successfully completed that exercise. So I think kind of the mantra I sort of developed myself from that experience was that once you think you've reached your limit, you still have more that you can give. And I've heard this mentioned in other ways too. David Goggins, former Navy SEAL, he calls this the 40% rule. When you felt like you're at your absolute limit, you've only reached 40% of your true potential. So I certainly kind of experienced that in that moment too. And it's certainly something that I carry with me from like the rest of my life too, because getting into other things that I've done, like my Peace Corps service, and then of course going for a master's degree, those were all challenging times in their own right too. And it helped me push through like those times where I either felt like I was either incapable of doing it, or if I felt defeated and I wanted to quit or give up. I kind of draw upon moments like that from boot camp, where I thought I had given it all then, but I had more that I could do. There was more that I could tap into. And
there's always more in the tank, right?
Exactly. So even though I felt like I was running on E, I'm basically running. I was still able to run on some fumes, I guess.
Yeah. So. Well, the mind is an incredible thing, isn't it? And I mean, I know that there was a lot of work on behalf of psychologists to try and, especially with I'm familiar with like the Navy SEAL program, for instance, where they taught them to focus on the moment, one foot in front of the other, cheer yourself on, have that kind of inner dialogue, be your own cheer section in a sense, and wipe away the negative voices, and don't picture failure, don't even let that image enter your mind. I think there are so many lessons that you can take from that setting and apply to the rest of your life, which is exactly what you seem to have done. And I think for anyone out there, check out the work of David Goggins. He is a remarkable man, and he's someone I've looked at as well myself. And a lot of interesting lessons to be taken from that. And then you went into education. As I understand it, you were studying education itself whilst you were in the military. Is that right?
Well, when I was actually on active duty in the service, I was going for my associate's degree. So just associate in arts at that point. But it was around that time I had made the decision to pursue elementary education following my service. And then after I got out of the Marine Corps, after 4 years of service, I moved back to Michigan for a while to finish out my bachelor's degree. And that, which was a pretty interesting transition, just going from, Marine to, just regular Joe college student.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And why elementary education, if I may ask?
Well, I'm not entirely sure exactly what kind of put me in that mindset. I think a lot of it was to continue to be of service.
Okay.
Just obviously I just spent 4 years being of service to my country, and I, thought elementary education would be a good way to, continue to be of service, but, in a different capacity. And then, of course, having developed a lot of or picked up a lot of lessons from my Marine Corps service, and thinking of like things that I could pass on to my students as I pursued elementary education as well.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Michigan. I moved to Saginaw, Michigan, and I studied there. And that was a pretty tough transition, because I think getting out of the military, I'll admit, I think I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I kind of thought that, as many veterans kind of think once they get out of the military, they think that they'll have job opportunities out the door, or that a lot of people will think that they're cool because they served in the military, or they'll have no difficulty getting dates or anything like that. I thought of all of this too, but of course, lo and behold, it didn't really quite work out that way. So a little bit of an interesting transition, but I had 2 years to go to get my bachelor's, and fortunately, pretty much all the credits that I had taken at my community college that I was studying at in North Carolina. I was stationed in North Carolina throughout my career, by the way, and I was able to get all my credits transferred, and I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in elementary education. And then once again, I hope I'm not getting too ahead of your question.
No, not at all. But, I did some homework, and I know that you studied in Japan, or you went on a field trip to Japan during this period, right?
Yeah, that was, I had about one semester to go before graduating, and I took this 2-week faculty-led study abroad to Japan, and didn't actually really need the credit.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to go to Japan. And
what was it about Japan specifically?
Well, a lot of things. It was, I grew up as a martial artist. I had studied karate since my early teens. So, awesome. And then when you think about some of the warriors from Japanese history, the samurai, the ninja. and that really interested me. And of course, I was also a little bit of an anime geek as well. You know, I grew up watching Toonami shows like, you know, Dragon Ball Z and all of those.
Sure, yeah.
And then of course, just, you know, the chance just to get out and travel, because traveling wasn't something that I did very much when I was actually in the Marine Corps. Because again, as I mentioned, I was part of a non-deployable unit. You know, I traveled to other places in and around the U.S., but never overseas. So I felt like maybe I kind of missed out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to kind of take this opportunity to go out and travel. And also this was the first time that this particular professor actually was doing this trip. And so basically I was kind of part of the beta test group, if you will. And that was a really amazing experience going to Japan. And we were there for 2 weeks, and we were just backpacking across the country. We went to 7 different cities, and first time I had actually been outside of the U.S., strangely enough.
It's quite a cultural change, isn't it?
Exactly. And of course, I'm from Michigan. I don't really count like the time I drove across the bridge to Canada. That's, I don't really count that as much of an international experience. But I just remembered how amazed I was just with seeing the different cities. And I just felt very at ease in that country. I remembered I woke up in Osaka. That was the city that we had flown into. I woke up, I went for a run, and I kind of saw like some of the local residential areas and a couple of the small shops and everything. And I just remembered that I just felt so at ease there. It's hard to describe, but you know, I think typically when I'd be in like in an urban setting, especially having been like gone through Marine Corps training and situational awareness and things like that, I felt like I didn't really need to be that way there. There was just something about the vibe of the place. It's hard. It's kind of hard to describe unless I guess you were there experiencing it for yourself.
Sure.
But, and then getting to interact with some of the locals and just how polite and well-mannered and disciplined everyone was there. I would go into a shop and I would purchase something, and you know, the cashier would bow as I was leaving, and of course I would bow in return, and of course I tried to you know, say please and thank you in like very terrible Japanese, but I was able to make it by. And then just seeing all the historic places too, you know, the castles there were just breathtakingly beautiful, and the countryside was just as beautiful too. I didn't realize that Japan was so mountainous throughout the country. Just taking a train from city to city and just, you know, seeing the mountains was just so beautiful. And oh my gosh, Paul, the food in Japan is so delicious. And I remembered just going on a bit of a rampage when we went to a kaiten sushi, which is, you know, if you've ever been there, it's like the conveyor belt sushi restaurant. And I must have stacked like 17 plates, man. Let me tell you, it was an experience. And I just kind of also remembered probably like one of the highlights from that trip. My professor, I guess apparently he had lived in Japan for like 5 years in his younger days. So he spoke the language fluently, and he took us to go visit the home of his host family, his host mother. And, you know, she lived in kind of like a small village, right. Alongside a mountain. And he asked us, he says, "Hey, I'm going to go for a walk to kind of just, you know, revisit the village. Does anyone want to come with?" And me and a few other students decided to go join him. And he took us to this trailhead at this forest. And we're walking through this trail. And then suddenly it opens up to this really, really large clearing where there's kind of a small shrine there. And it's just nice, open and clear. And we're the only ones there. Excuse me. And I just remembered that no other tourist is going to see this place. It's just, and it was so amazing seeing this shrine there. It was like it was like a place that was frozen in time. It's I really wish I had some pictures of it. I think I may here, and I'll probably, if I can find them, I'll send them to you and show you. But I just remember that experience right there. I don't know what it was. It just really stuck with me, probably just because it was so calm and serene there. And again, it's just, I knew that I'm probably seeing something that very few visitors who come to Japan will probably ever see. And I think it was just because I knew this professor and I was willing to travel with him on this trip.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
It was like, if you've seen like, those old, samurai movies and stuff like that, though, too, you probably know what I'm talking about.
I'm a huge fan of the genre myself, actually, and I can relate to that. And growing up with martial arts, and I studied kendo when I was very young.
Nice.
For a time, and then ninjutsu and a few other things, several other things over the years. I've always been fascinated with the place, but I've not managed to get there. My brother has, and he speaks the language, and he's been out there for months at a time. But I am envious, actually, because that's one of the places on my list. But you got the travel bug, clearly, from that. And did that inform your decision to volunteer for the Peace Corps?
Oh, absolutely. That, along coupled with a couple of other things. When I came back from Japan, I went into my student teaching. Mm-hmm. And as I was getting through my student teaching, there was a lot of chatter amongst the faculty in the education department, as well as some of my peers who were also studying to become teachers. And that was pretty much the sorry state of the education system in Michigan at the time, which it was in really, really rough shape. They were starting to close schools. They were letting go of teachers left and right. And by the time that we all had graduated, there were far more licensed teachers in the state than there were jobs available for everybody.
Oh, I know that feeling well. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, I kind of had to make a decision. It's because, what am I going to do? I just spent, all this time and invested just my soul to all that studying, and as you've gone through the education process, it could be a soul crushing endeavor.
Sure,
and then now here I am wondering, am I going to be able to have a job, or am I going to be unemployed following this? So I kind of had to take a look at some options. And this is a very long story, but I'll kind of just sort of give the cliff notes. I came across the Peace Corps, and then I come to find out that Peace Corps has education sectors in countries across the world. And I'm like, well, great. I just now so happen to have skills in that. And then, of course, reeling off of my trip to Japan, having that amazing experience, as you've alluded to, it certainly did leave me with the travel bug. And I was kind of itching to get back out in the world again. So this kind of seemed to be a good opportunity that can combine not only this newfound passion for travel, but actually utilize the skills that I had just cultivated through my degree program.
Yeah.
So I ended up choosing the Peace Corps, and I had to take a train to Chicago to get interviewed, and then I got nominated. Then I had to do like a whole battery of medical and dental screenings to make sure that I was physically fit to go. And the Peace Corps, actually, strangely enough, they do have pretty strict requirements to become a volunteer. Like, you actually have to have, at minimum, a bachelor's degree to actually go and volunteer. It's not like anyone can just step up and volunteer and do it. They actually have to meet a couple of set of criteria. And
they're pretty stringent too, as well, aren't they?
Yeah, it is. And for good reason, because, they're asking volunteers to commit 2 years of their life to go live in a developing country somewhere. And so I think, and I have maybe a feeling, and I don't know exactly how true this is just kind of my hypothesis, is that if they feel that someone has the discipline and the fortitude to finish 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, that hopefully they would have the same level of commitment to living in a developing country for 2 years. That's just my guess. I haven't actually confirmed that.
And who better than a former Marine, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's, I have a lot to take from that experience that I ultimately did apply to my Peace Corps service. But going along to how I kind of found my way to the Gambia was, now I didn't actually really get to choose which country I go to. Basically, the way Peace Corps, how they set it up is you get like regional preferences, and it's pretty broad. It's like you can choose South America, Asia, so you don't really get to like dial it in and choose specific places.
Got it.
And I can't remember exactly what my regions were. I want to say maybe like my first choice was probably Southeast Asia, probably followed by South America, and then maybe Africa or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but ultimately volunteers were selected based on kind of skill sets and kind of a needs basis. Like if they need someone with a certain set of skills in a certain area, they would invite them to go there. So basically how it worked was, after I'd done all the medical screening, got interviewed, got nominated, several months later, actually, it took a good while, but they FedExed to me this big blue envelope that had an actual typed out and hand signed invitation letter saying that, or inviting me to go serve in the Gambia. And when I read that, I'm like, where on earth is the Gambia? I literally have never heard of that country before, ever. And of course, I just, what is it what do you do when you don't know something? You Google it, right?
Yeah.
So, I took to Google, found out that it's actually the smallest country on the entire African continent. It's completely engulfed by Senegal in West Africa, and kind of read up a little bit more about it. And I'm thinking, okay, this would be an interesting place to go serve. And of course, it wasn't amongst my original choices. Like it wasn't in Southeast Asia, it wasn't in Central or South America, but I looked at that invitation, especially the whole invitation package that they sent me. It was this big fancy blue envelope with the invitation letter and a ton of other supporting documents and pamphlets and things like that. And I remember telling myself that if I decline this invitation, I highly doubt Peace Corps is going to go through the trouble of assembling another fancy schmancy envelope like this again to invite me to go someplace else. So it seemed like a very now or never type of deal. So I pondered on it, and then ultimately, once again, even though it wasn't my first choice, I was recalling my previous services, the military, and then, of course, going for my bachelor's in elementary education to continue being of service. And I just knew that this was a calling greater than myself. And so once again, even though it wasn't probably a country that I probably would have chosen deliberately, I knew that this wasn't about me. This is about like the people there in the Gambia that I could potentially be of service to. So the next day, after getting my invitation, I sent an email to Peace Corps, per the instructions that was given to me in that big blue envelope, to let them know that yes, I'm ready and willing to go be of service in the Gambia. And then a few months later, I was on a plane to West Africa to go begin my journey there.
And you faced some real challenges there too as well. I mean, I understand that you ended up getting kind of, I don't want to get ahead of the story, but you got parasites and you ended up picking up some other things while you were serving. But what was it like? What was your day-to-day like in the Gambia? You were living amongst a family unit, as I understand it?
Yes, I was part of a host family in a fairly large village, actually, kind of on the eastern side of the country. So way out there in a pretty rural area, far away from the capital city, Banjul. And I would get up every morning, and I was able to get myself a pretty set routine. And a lot of the elements to my morning routine that I had in Gambia are part of my morning routine that I have even now. I would get up, I would put on some music, and I would always have to put in earphones because Gambians, they're early risers, and my family's compound was literally right outside the market square. So it was pretty loud in the morning with, all these different vendors getting their stands set up, and a lot of loud conversations. Gambians, they're very social. So, I woke up to a lot of chatter. So I would kind of just put in my music just to kind of, sort of retain my own space, I suppose. And so I listened to music. I would drink a ton of water because I knew it was going to get hot that day. So I had to hydrate right away. And then, I would also do some form of movement, some form of exercise. And in my case, since I didn't have like a gym to go to or any fancy equipment in my tiny little square hut, I would just kind of shadow box in there. And then once I was ready to, interact with other people, I would open up my front door. Like I had my main corrugated steel door, and then I would have my screen door. And then when I would open up the steel door, that was usually the indication to my host family that, okay, yeah, I'm awake. I've gone through my routine and I'm ready to interact with others. And that was actually kind of a boundary that I had to set for myself, because again, with Gambians being very, very social people, it's a type of culture where, you can walk into anyone's home in the village and basically they would pay you no mind. Like they would welcome you in, and, and it wasn't too uncommon for, different villagers to join me and my host father and my host brothers for like a meal, like lunch or something. So I kind of had to set that boundary high, because my little square hut and my small backyard, that was pretty much the only place in the entire country where I could truly be alone, right. Which sometimes, you need that. And not to mention, I'm also introverted by nature too, which was, that was kind of the big challenge for a while, just trying to be social with this new culture when I've pretty much grown up with an introverted personality. So after I would interact with my family, typically they would bring me something for breakfast. And so I would have breakfast, and then I would ride my bike to the school. I worked at a school there in the village. And what my role was I was a primary teacher trainer. So I wasn't actually teaching classes or teaching the students, but I was working with the teachers to help them develop like different teaching methods, classroom management techniques, and things like that. Right, and so that was a pretty fun thing. And I would occasionally do classroom observations. I would observe some of the teachers, and then I would kind of give them feedback on things that I've observed and, see how I can help them in certain ways. But that was kind of a little bit of a challenging job because, part of the culture there is, they're not all Gambians are going to be entirely open to change or to changing things up. They kind of have the mindset that, this is how we've always done it, and so this is how we're going to continue to do it. So they would like listen to me out of respect with some of the things that I had to say, but seldomly would they actually try to implement some of the things that I shared with them. So it kind of made it a little bit challenging. Like there were some days where I'm wondering why I was actually there, if nothing that I did would actually be implemented. Right. But there were some teachers who were pretty open. They would come to me and like just when I'd be at the school, they'll be like, hey, I noticed this in my classroom today. This is what the students were doing. Do you have any ideas or strategies that I could try? And so I would help out where I can, but I kind of knew, and I figured out early on that maybe I wouldn't reach all of them. So,
but you only have to change one mind to create a sea change, I guess, right? I mean, it's only these things will expand. One would hope, at least exponentially, eventually.
Yeah, I do felt like to some degree, maybe I would hopefully, maybe started a ripple effect, I suppose, even on a small scale. But speaking of ripple effect, had I achieved that in my school, or have I achieved many results being a teacher trainer? I don't know. I'm sure I've impacted the teachers in some way positively. But I'd have to say, though, my greatest accomplishment that I achieved when I was in the Gambia didn't happen in my actual role as a volunteer at the school, that is. But I'd have to say my greatest achievement have to be how I was able to serve my host family that I was living with.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I walked into my host family's house one day, and, I was just kind of, just seeing what the kids were up to or something like that. And I was walking and I saw all their different bedrooms, and I noticed that none of their beds had mosquito nets. And that was a little bit, unsettling for me because, the Peace Corps had taken the threat of malaria very, very seriously with us volunteers. We were all given really, really high quality mosquito nets for our beds in our houses. And we were all put on malaria prophylaxis pretty much for the entire time that we were there.
Yeah.
And so I went to my host father and I asked him, why there were no mosquito nets in the house. And because I told him about malaria and that it was the mosquitoes that they had spread it, because most Gambians, well, I wouldn't say most, but at least like many of the Gambians that I've interacted with, they would often refer to malaria as kind of a catch-all term. Like if you're just sick in general, you have malaria. Like if you have the flu, you have the malaria. If you got the sniffles or a runny nose, you got malaria. It was kind of just a catch-all term that they would use.
Yeah.
But then I explained to him that, and the best Sarah Hooley I could possibly conjure up. That was the language that I was trying to learn.
Right.
And I told him that it wasn't the, that malaria, it's the mosquitoes. Like, when a mosquito bites you, you could get malaria. And that kind of, I could kind of see the shock in his face when he looked at me after I had explained that. And then I told him that's why I have a mosquito net, so I don't get malaria. And then he took it upon himself. He got every single bed in his home a mosquito net.
Wow.
And for my baby host sister, Isatu, who was she was born about 3 months after I arrived at my village. He got her this mosquito net that was kind of shaped like a crock pot lid. And so they would lay her down in bed, and then they would just cover her with this little mosquito net. And I just remembered I came out from my house one night just to kind of, sit with my family, kind of talk with them a little bit before I went to bed. And I just remembered seeing Isatu, my baby host sister, just sleeping so soundly underneath that mosquito net. And I tell you what, Paul, it was such a really, really good feeling just to see her sleeping so soundly, knowing that she was safe, that, these mosquitoes who basically, they don't care where they get, their blood from, they're going to go after anyone as long as they can get blood. And just knowing that, she was protected and that she was safe in that moment was that was easily the best feeling that I had during my entire service. And this is about maybe about 6 months, maybe 7 months into my service. And at this point I had already gone through so many trials. I've already had a couple of radical diseases, I got a couple intestinal parasites, and
because you were living without running water. I mean, all the things we take for granted, you were living without for that entire time, right? That must have been quite a shock.
Right. Yeah. Because all the water that I had to collect was from communal taps in the village, and they would only come on for a couple of hours every single day. Interestingly enough, the water taps were run by solar panels that were kind of in the outskirts of the village. But in order to conserve energy, they would only turn them on for a couple hours during the day. So I had to collect all this water in buckets and pails, carry it back to my house. And then and even before I could make it safe enough to drink, I had to take it through its paces. Yeah. I had to run it through a filter, and then I had to, fill up my Nalgene bottle with it. And then also, but that was just to filter out mostly the heavy metals and things like that. And I had to put a drop of bleach in there to kill off kind of the microbes and all these tiny, waterborne parasites that would do me harm. So, but yeah, it wasn't as simple as, being here stateside or, being in the UK, where I also live there as well, where I could just go to a tap, in my kitchen and just, have pretty much a seemingly endless supply of clean drinking water.
Yeah.
It's like, I had to ration water, and I had to, make sure I had enough to drink. I had enough to bathe with. I had enough to wash clothes and dishes with, to last me until till the same time the next day when the taps would come on again. And there was even one time where the taps didn't come on. They had an issue with the solar panels, and basically I wasn't able to collect water for 3 whole days.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And I tell you what, man, there's very few things that will mess with your head more than the thought of potentially not being able to fulfill a basic need like drinking water.
Yeah.
Because once I realized that there was something wrong, and then that I wasn't going to be able to collect water that day, and ultimately leading to the same realization the next day too, I had to stop bathing. I had to stop washing dishes and clothes.
Yeah.
And I had to stop working out too, because I couldn't afford to, sweat out precious fluids. Yeah. And so and the only water that I had was just to drink. And I just remembered, I just got so frustrated and irritable, because it's like I was running low on water, and I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to get more. But I think what kind of sort of bumped me down a notch in that situation was the realization that, well, if I can't collect water, my host family can't collect water either. And most of the family members that make up my host family are young children. Mm. So I told myself, Josh, you have no reason to be complaining right now. I mean, you think about those kids that are, most of them under the age of 10. They're not able to, they have a limited supply of water just like you do, and they seem to be handling it a lot better than I did. So that kind of helped me shape up a little bit, but still very much so. When you think there's a possibility that you're not going to be able to fulfill a basic need, because when it comes to water, you can go 3 days without it and then it's game over.
Yeah.
So, but eventually the taps did come back on, and I was able to get water and rehydrate myself, and then kind of get back to, a more like normal routine. Yeah. But during those 3 days though, oh gosh, it was awful. I mean, and that was a very trying moment during my service.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I mean, I was a survival enthusiast as a teenager after a trip to South Africa, and I remember the first things you read are how to collect water. Forget everything else, build a shelter, collect water, and things like that. But when you're in a situation where the only way you can get water is there's no river nearby, it's a well, and you have to tap that well, and that's it. What are your options? There's no rain going to come and save you, is there? It's incredible. Yeah. I know that you're really limited time-wise today, so and there's so much stuff I want to get into with you. I mean, we've still got to get to your archaeology and the all-around adventure and all of this stuff. So I guess you face a lot of stuff, including putting out fires, and I heartily encourage listeners to go and check out the All Around Adventure podcast and check out the interviews and the blogs where Josh talks about his experiences in Gambia and, getting dysentery and giardia and fighting fires in the middle of the night even. Some really incredible stuff. Just to summarize, what did you take away from this? Like, what lessons did going through all of this teach you when you brought this back, when you came back to the States, or when you came over to Britain?
Right. Well, I'd say probably the biggest lesson was, I guess I'd say more or less just to kind of focus on what's most important. I think in the modern times that we live in, especially in developed countries like the U.S. And the U.K., for example, is we oftentimes tend to get really, really focused and dwell on things that kind of in the end actually really don't matter. Especially, I think, when it comes to material possessions, let's say. I think there's a tendency, in today's society where a lot of people want to try to keep up with the Joneses. We want the latest and greatest smartphone. We want the really big high def TV that eventually will become obsolete with the way technology advances a year from now, and then you're just going to throw down to try to get the latest and greatest one there. And we want the nicest clothes and, this and that. But I think probably having that experience in the Gambia, where I realized that I don't really need any of that stuff. Like, I don't really need to have like the latest and greatest smartphone. I don't need to be connected to the internet, 24/7 or anything like that. It's just, if you're able to meet your basic needs, you're good to go, and you don't really need much else. And I think when I came back, I really cleaned house quite a bit, especially with, again, the material side of things. Like, I went through all the stuff that I had put in storage and looking at a lot of these things, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, where did I even get half this stuff anyway?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like, was this thing a gift, or did I buy this? Where did this come from? I mean, clearly, it didn't really serve much value in my life anymore. So I ended up making multiple trips back and forth to thrift stores to donate things, or hand them down to maybe like family members or whatever. And it just made me realize that it kind of allowed me to embrace more of this minimalistic Spartan lifestyle, where it's just, my life is not centered around material things, but then allows me to focus on other things that are much more meaningful and valuable, like building strong relationships with others, or working on developing myself in whatever ways that I can, which has become a bit of a theme with All Around Adventure and the All Around Adventure podcast. And then this really kind of came to fruition when I moved to England to study for my master's degree. Is when I moved to England, it was whatever I can fit into 2 checked airplane bags and a carry-on, and that was it for my entire time living in England. And then when I moved down here to Florida, a couple years later to start my career as an archaeologist, the rule, I had like a 4-door sedan at the time. And my rule was that if it doesn't fit in the car, it's not going. And then I drove all the way down to Florida to start here. Hardly had to accumulate anything else, and it's just kind of embracing a much more simplistic lifestyle that way has truly been beneficial to me. Now, and of course, I'm not here to knock anyone who likes having technologies and nice things. I mean, I like nice things as much as the next person does. But I just kind of developed like the mindset where I don't make that the sole important thing in my life. They're nice to have, but there are far more things in my life that are much more important, and I try to focus on those things a lot more. But I think we have a tendency to really kind of make all these technologies and these material things kind of like the focal point in our lives, like to the point where I'll see people out and about where there might be a couple on a date, and the man sitting across the table from his date, and he's on his phone doing whatever, or there's like even a group of people all sitting together having
all on their phones.
All on their phones, and everything like that though too, and which seems very counterintuitive, because those technologies, they make us more connected than we ever been, but at the same time we can't be any further apart. And so, which I feel is pretty much the exact opposite of what those things were intended to do with things like social media and everything. So that was certainly. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I guess the technological drive has changed from social media being something that brings us together to social media being something we become addicted to kind of feed an ongoing endorphin release. But that's another conversation completely. Obviously, that's a whole nother thing. What is it about? And just to kind of come back to your point there, I've seen you describe it as collect memories, not things, as part of your Wisdom Wednesday. As a student of Stoicism and various other philosophies myself, I really love your Wisdom Wednesday episodes. What inspired these, and like, how did you come to these?
Well, I think it's just. The Wisdom Wednesday, which unfortunately I don't know if I'm going to be continuing with that particular show, but I'm going to be doing something similar as I launch season 2 in the podcast, and we'll certainly get to that. But I think the podcast in general overall, it's my way of kind of giving back and continuing to add value in my own creative way, But I think like that particular lesson, specifically collect memories, not things. What I really kind of want to drive home, with our audience about that is, down the line, again, focusing on what's important, down the line when you're almost at the end of the thing, because the harsh reality, let's face it, we're all going to die someday. We're all on borrowed time. We're all in a state of decay right now. But I always like to think to myself is, at the end of it all, let's say I buckle down, I make tons of money, I have a huge house, I have material possessions up the wazoo. In the final moments of my life, all that stuff is worthless. It means absolutely nothing at the very end of my life. But what's going to live on, or what I would ponder on in my final days, is the experiences that I've had. It's like I don't see myself being on my deathbed, looking back on my life and saying to myself, man, I was really happy that I bought that, that fancy game system, or I was so glad that I threw down for that iPhone. I don't even know what version we're on right now.
No, I have no idea.
I think what I'm going to look back on, or what I want to be able to look back on, is the time that I took that risk and I traveled to that country when I didn't think I had, let's say, the money to go to, or I was feeling reluctant to go to, or the times that I cultivated a very deep relationship with someone that lasted throughout my life, or just some other experience. Basically, I want to make sure that when the end of time for me comes, that I don't have to look back on my life and regret things. I don't want to have to ask myself, what if, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? And it could be big things, or it could even be small things like, and then of course, like our audience, they could, they'll resonate with this in different things, but it's like, and maybe a couple of examples of small things, like, what if I had, approached that girl that I thought was beautiful at the coffee shop and I wanted to meet her? Or what if I had gotten over my fears and went and asked my boss for that promotion that I felt that I deserved? Or, it could be anything, or taking that trip, or, started off on this business idea that I had, or, whatever the case may be. It's like, I don't want to have to look back on my life and ask myself questions like that.
Yeah.
I want to be able to look back and say, my gosh, it was one hell of a ride. And so that's kind of been a little bit of a focal point for all around adventure, is, really trying to encourage people to live their best lives while we can, because, life isn't a game. We don't get to hit reset and, have a second try at this thing. Mm-hmm. It's literally one and done. And a lot of it just involves being deliberate and intentional with how we choose to live our lives. And, we could spend our lives focusing on, things that don't really serve us in the end. You and I, we were kind of talking about social media, that, good things can come from social media. Sure. You and I met through social media and led 100%. To this conversation. Yep. But you also can find you can waste a lot of time, and and let's face it, there's a lot of negativity out there too. Yeah. That does not serve anyone very well at all, and it can actually bring them down. But and I won't get too deep into this, but I'll just say that if you see a lot of negativity on social media, it's because you're following it. So being deliberate and intentional, which is to make sure that you spend your time on there wisely as well. So
amen to that. Yep.
Yeah.
100%, man. Totally agree. I know that you have a hard out pretty soon. So I think to finish up, I'm hoping we can come back and have a second round and talk about archaeology and do all this stuff, because I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface really on everything you're doing. But let's finish up by talking about Operation Dual Trek and your intentions with that. And yeah, let's get into that.
Right. Well, Operation Dual Trek is a lot of interesting things happen with that. That was actually supposed to be done this summer. Yeah. But of course, as we all know, 2020 has been a bit of a year. Mm-hmm. So it didn't end up happening this time around. So I'm hoping to do it probably in the summer of 2021 now. Granted that things shape up quite a bit. But what I want to do for Operation Dual Trek is I want to walk 1,000 miles in South America across two countries down there, Paraguay and Uruguay. and it's going to be a solo walking expedition, and I am doing it, or I want to do it, in order to raise money for a nonprofit here in the States that I support called American Veterans Archaeological Recovery. And this is going to be a way for me to serve my fellow veterans. And what the organization does, and I'm friends with the founder and CEO, Stephen Humphreys, who's an Air Force veteran and also an archaeologist himself.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he what he does is that he will take American veterans, so many of them would be like wounded veterans, and he would take them out into the field to go do field archaeology. And if there's a multifaceted purpose for doing so as well. Veterans, they get to interact with other veterans, because being part of the military, you're part of this pretty tight-knit community. And it's hard to leave that community and be on your own and kind of, start anew on your own elsewhere. Yeah. So this is a good chance to basically get them reconnected with the community. They get this amazing experience to be working on an archaeological dig, because, you know what it's like. We've talked about this before, just kind of like the feeling of being able to unearth something that's been lost to the world for so long, and until you find it.
Nothing like it.
And so yeah, they get to experience that as well. And it also kind of sets them up for success too. Maybe they take this experience and they find, hey, I actually kind of like doing this. How do I maybe pursue it as a potential career path? So it sets them up with the next steps to be successful with that. Or if they're going to go and pursue something else besides archaeology, hey, at the very least, maybe they develop some reference that they could put on their CV or something, Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to be had there. And it's definitely something that I want to do to serve veterans, because, a lot of people might not know this, but at least for American veterans, the suicide rate for American veterans is pretty high. It's estimated to be about 22 veterans a day will commit suicide.
Wow.
And of course that's an arbitrary number that was set a few years back. It could be less than that now. It could be more. And I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but I think probably with everything that's happened in the wake of COVID-19, I'm probably going to guess it might be more than that. Mm-hmm. And so this will be a chance to, again, for veterans to kind of find their next mission, so to speak, because I think that's a lot of things that really does affect a lot of veterans once they, leave the service, because once they're in the service, they know what their mission is. They know what is expected of them. They know what they have to do. But once they leave the service, though, that same structure and that same clear vision and mission is not present anymore. And so they kind of, find themselves in limbo, so to speak, a lot of times. Yeah. But, I think a program like this will hopefully kind of help them find their next mission and how they're going to kind of carry on with the next chapter in life. So that's what I want to do. So I want to do this endeavor, and I know it's something that could be very challenging. I've done other physical challenges in the past. I ran a marathon. I fought in the cage as an MMA fighter before. I've done some Spartan races and Tough Mudders and things like that, but I've never actually done like a through hike of any kind before. So this would be a first. And not only that, but it'll also be in a foreign country, in an area that I'm entirely unfamiliar with. And I know very little about Paraguay and Uruguay. When I hear about travelers who travel to South America, it's usually Brazil, Peru, Argentina.
Sure. Yeah.
Those are usually the places that people have stories of. But I've heard very few stories come from Paraguay and Uruguay. So for all intents and purposes, both those countries are kind of quote unquote uncharted territory to me. Mm-hmm. So there's that kind of mystery aspect too. And also, I'll say this is going to be a very raw adventure. Like I'm not having like a camera crew follow me or anything like that. I'm doing this completely solo, and I'm not really, I basically have a starting point and an ending point, but as far as doing meticulous planning along the way, I'm not really doing that. And I think kind of like what I want to do is I want to have this raw adventure, because in this day and age, we can learn pretty much everything that there is to know about a certain place before we go there.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way down to even looking at what's on the menu of particular restaurants in a place, you know? And I think it kind of takes away like the mystery of travel. When I think of like, let's just talk about the age of exploration, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, that, and the age of discovery is that you have people like sailing to these faraway lands, landing ashore and not knowing what's beyond what's beyond that beach,
yep.
you know, and they got to go and kind of figure it out for themselves and explore and do all these things and face like, you know, what's beyond that beach. So, and I kind of want to have like the same thing too. I want to be able to like roll into a town and kind of find my way from there, you know, talk to people, like learn what's where, and, you know, kind of get to see the place for myself. And rather than like Google imaging like every step of the way and
sure,
like ahead of time too.
Yeah.
So because in this day and age, when it comes to travel and adventure, I think it's kind of hard to be surprised now. You know, it's kind of hard to, you know, just, you know, to wander off the beaten path and kind of be surprised, because we have access to information like we never have before.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to have like that raw, like real adventure experience when you already know everything about the place you're going to. So
that's an incredibly valuable point, actually, and a lot of the time we don't even realize we're doing it as well. Like I got into a habit of looking up from a want to prepare, really, from a desire to be prepared for whatever comes up. I've got into the habit of going, okay, what's going to be at this place? Where can I get food? Where can I source this? And of course, you're absolutely right. There's that, you lose something. You lose some of the poetry, I guess, of the experience.
Yeah. If
you do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
That's incredibly brave. I know you need to head off. I hope we can do this again and soon.
Absolutely.
And dig into some of the more archaeological stuff. You finish out your show with Always Move Forward. You seem to be the embodiment of that. Where did that come from?
Well, that's when I say always move forward, you know, life's a journey. Everything that we want to pursue is going to be a journey, you know, no matter what it is, whether that's you trying to become, like, let's say, a better parent, mm-hmm. you know, a better spouse, whether you're going for a degree, like how you and I have done, or like whether you're trying to build a business, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, whatever journey you're going to embark upon. You know, it could be an arduous journey. You know, you're going to run into obstacles along the way. You know, you're going to run into failures, whatever along the way as well. But the laws of physics go that as long as you continue to move forward, eventually you will reach your destination. You know, whatever it is. You know, it's it's a shame that I see a lot of people who are really excited about pursuing something in their lives, but the moment the path gets a little bit arduous, that they back down and they back away. And so that's why I say always move forward, because as long as you do that, as long as you keep either going through those obstacles, finding your way, you know, I always like the saying, I will either find a way or I will make one. And eventually you will reach the destination that you want to go for, as long as you keep moving forward. So it's that's like the simplest way, you know, I could put it. You know, it's just as long as you move forward, you'll reach your destination. You know,
I don't think Rocky could put it better himself. He's one of my idols for that reason. Thank you so much for joining us. I know how busy you are. I've personally really enjoyed diving into your world and found your journey so far to be both humbling and inspiring. And I want to thank you for that, and for the work you continue to do, much of it unpaid. And I know this can be a sometimes thankless task, putting content out and trying to share your journey with the world. So thank you for sharing your world and your wisdom with us.
Absolutely.
I encourage everyone out there to take the time to go check out Josh's various endeavors. They are wide and deep and really fascinating. Like I say, I hope we can do part 2. Good luck with your current archaeological task. I know that you're basically on a watching brief right now. So hopefully we can come back and talk about that again soon.
I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh.
All right. Thank you for having me, Paul.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. Please do go and check out the show notes where I've put links to the websites, the Instagram, social media, etc., where you can find Josh and his work. Do go and check out his channel. His blog is fascinating. His Wisdom Wednesday is one of my favorite aspects of it. So I hope that does return in some form soon. But do go and check out what he's got there. There's a lot of content. My cat is being extraordinarily demanding right now and asking that I go and play with her. So I guess I better go and do that. But before I do so, please remember to, if you like this podcast, please do me a favor and rate it on whatever platform you listen to. Go onto iTunes if you can and rate it there. Subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and tell your friends. I've been Dr. Paul Harrison. This has been the Profane Humanities Podcast. Thanks for listening.